Hmm.
We are live.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Eastern Shore Delegation, our first meeting of the 2025 legislative session. Call the meeting to order. Could we please rise for Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Senator DeCroza, could you kick us off this year with a prayer?
Absolutely. Good morning, Eastern Shore Delegation members and friends. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day to gather together as an Eastern Shore delegation. We thank you for the opportunity we have as members to serve our constituents and to work together on our shore priorities. We remember our late colleague and friend and former chair of this delegation, Rich Colburn, who always fought for the people of the shore, and we extend our deepest condolences to Alma and all of the Colburn family. Dear God, we thank you also for our delegation partners who join us in this important work of public service. We are facing challenging times in Maryland with a serious budget and energy crisis and an avian influenza outbreak in Caroline and Queen Anne's counties. We pray for your wisdom and guidance as we serve and work together to protect our shore way of life. And we seek together in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Mary Beth, then, for the honor that you gave to Rich Colburn, a wonderful man leader for the Eastern Shore. Members, I'd like to get an approval for the March 8, 2024 meetings, that would minute meetings that was from last year, and then also January 9th, 2025 meeting minutes where Jay Jacobs was elected as vice chair of the Eastern Shore delegation. Could I get a motion in a second?
Do a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So this morning we are starting with the Department of Natural Resources and our Secretary Josh Kurtz. Josh, the floor is yours, and thank you for kicking off the season with us this year.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. I know that there's a lot we want to discuss in a pretty short period of time. I did want to touch on what Senator Croza did mention is the avian influenza, and I had a chance to talk to Senator Mounts yesterday, Delegate Jacobs really briefly, but I wanted to just give you all an update. I think some really good news that's coming in today. So the way that we have been responding to the influenza in partnership with AG and many of the other partners is to really lean into the contract and the way that we handle injured and dead animals. And so we in Maryland, and we do this a little bit differently than Delaware, I think that's important. We are under a contract with APHIS. So APHIS is the agency that is responsible for collection of any injured or nuisance wildlife or dead animals. And the way that we do that, they handle about 30,000 calls for us a year through a 1-800 number. They then report back out to us, letting us know kind of like what they're seeing, helping us identify kind of pathways forward. And so we have been continuing to rely on that. We've been having conversations with APHIS to make sure that we've had a proper amount of capacity on their end. And starting today, we expanded that agreement yesterday. Starting today, we will have additional staff on the ground from APHIS helping us to continue to do that collection. At the department, we're also responsible for aviaries at our park services. And so we have staff that are trained in handling animals that could be contaminated. So our park staff, in partnership with our wildlife agency, have been responding to public lands and adjacent to public land properties to do collection of any dead animals or potentially dying animals. We are also working a little bit differently too with our wildlife unit. And so what we've directed them to do is if they get calls directly to the office, instead of having to go through APHIS, is to get out and to actually do some of that collection to help supplement the work that APHIS already does. So I think one thing that we're really happy to see is DENREC also kind of taking up a similar model there too and coordinating through APHIS. And so we are working to make sure that all the communications in both states are very consistent. I know it's been a challenge recently to figure out exactly where to go to in Maryland. And so we'll have a press release coming out today. I think a much tighter communication on our end, just to ensure that everybody recognizes what tools are available and how we're operating. I don't think we had done a great job of making it very clear kind of why we put out the 1-800 number for APHIS, and it's because that really is the point. That's how we operate, and that's the contract that we've been under with them for almost 20 years. They've been an incredible partner for us going back to many of the bird flu outbreaks, looking at what happened at Conowingo with the vultures, et cetera. And so we work closely with them and follow their lead. So I just wanted to start with that because I know that this is a critically important issue, and wanted to share the increase in resources that we're able to procure that are starting today here in Maryland. So because of the nature of that, I did want to, Mr. Chair, start with that, and happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I can jump into some of the other things we wanted to share with you all.
Okay, members, do you have any questions on that particular subject? Delegate Jacobs.
Am I live? Yeah, I'm live. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for starting out on this issue. When I talked with you last night, I said, well, not necessarily on the fisheries as much as other things, and this was certainly top of the list. You know, I've kind of been disappointed on the response of DNR in the past few days. You know, with these calls that have come in about, you know, dead animals, especially in my district, and a pretty severe case with some buzzards and vultures over in Queen Anne's County. And you know, the department just said call Department of Ag, and you know, then they end up calling me because they're frustrated. And I just think that there should be, and hopefully in what you said this morning, you're going to be addressing that. There should be better communication with people when they have these problems, because it seems to be a level of confusion in what is really a serious situation right now. And you know, I hope that, you know, I'm taking you at your word, because you've always been top notch in that you're going to take care of this, and hopefully this communication is going to improve so that when people make a call that they're getting an answer and not getting past the buck. You know, we need to get on this stuff and get these birds taken care of. I mean, we got a serious problem with dead and dying snow geese and buzzards that I think is certainly contributing to the seriousness of this issue that on the shore right now. And I just want to reiterate our concerns, you know, on that, being able for citizens to be able to make the call and get the help they need immediately, and not be, hey, call Department of Ag or call APHIS or whatever. I mean, there needs to be some help there, even if you say, can I make the call for you and connect you or something, you know, something like that.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate. And I definitely want to take ownership of that. I don't think we have been nearly as tight on the communication as we needed to be. That is something that will absolutely change. I think we leaned into the implementation strategies we had, but we didn't do a good job of sharing what those are and centralizing it to that one space. And so we'll make sure that we're very consistent with that. I think continuing that APHIS 1-800 number now, especially because we have that additional capacity for them on the ground. But I hear you, and we're going to make sure that today we very much tighten up that communication. I got an email. I think I saw Zach on here from Zach asking some of the same questions. And I think that really made us recognize that the way that we're getting this information out has not been successful. And we'll be making quickly making a change on that to ensure that we're very consistent. And because this is, as you said, we're on the verge of literal crisis. And so we need to be communicating that effectively and with the proper level, I think, of seriousness that it deserves.
Yes, thank you again. And let me make sure I understand. There may be cases where your officers will be picking up some of these birds to help in the situation. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yes, and yeah, we I think an area that we've maybe done a better job is Tuckahoe. There was a large number of birds there. We were able to deploy some of our park staff who have that certification. And internally at the department, because we have aviaries, we've elevated to our highest level there of quarantine. So we're trying to ensure that any of the wild bird populations that we manage, on state properties are not going to have any impact to the wild bird populations or potentially create a reservoir for the influenza. So so in that space, we've had in Tuckahoe, especially because of that highly trained staff, we've been able to respond more quickly. But I think the focus really for us with APHIS is ensuring that we've got adequate resources from them too. And I think having additional folks on the ground will also help just people feel more comfortable, right? Because they will see more government individuals coming around and collecting these species and these birds.
Yeah, thank you. Now, there is a call this afternoon at 2 with the Department of Ag on an update, or I assume you'll have representation on that call as well.
Yes, sir. I'm planning to be on that call and providing all of the same information. I think to your point earlier, we clearly have a communication gap, and I need to close that quickly.
Thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chairman. So on questions related to this direct subject, Josh has kind of broken this out. I see a question from Senator Mounts.
I just very quickly, thank you very much. And Secretary Kurtz, thank you for hearing us yesterday and hearing our concerns. This is different than in the past, where in the past, it's sort of, in my understanding, in the past, most of this has either been, it's been in isolated flocks. What we're dealing with right now is different with DNR, Department of Agriculture, two different agencies. And to kind of follow up on what Delegate Jacobs was mentioning, it seems like there isn't a point person in charge. And that to me is a concern. And I think this is a time when the governor, this is just a suggestion, but there needs to be a point person in charge of who's managing all this, especially when there's, flocks in Delaware and Maryland, and this is kind of evolving pretty quickly. I would just recommend for the departments and the governor's office to get together and at least get a point person to lead the charge on this, so that message is clear. Because, as you've heard, there's been a little problem with messaging.
Mm-hmm.
Just a comment, not really a question.
Thank you, Senator. And yeah, I'll bring that up with Secretary Addix. We've been on the phone most of the morning actually talking about this. But we'll make sure that there is a very clear singular point of contact, especially for all of you.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, I don't see further questions on that subject if you'd like to continue with your presentation.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to mention a couple things that are going on the Eastern Shore that we're really excited about. The first is the Graham property. So as you know, Wicomico County is one of 2 jurisdictions in Maryland without a state park. We just did legislative notice around this property. It is on the Nanticoke River. It has a lot of historic value, a lot of waterfront access. It's just about 450 acres. So we've done legislative notice. Next step for us is BPW, but we're really excited to be very close to closing that gap of not having a state park in Wicomico County. So I know legislative notice has gone out, so just wanted to flag that for everyone. We've been working on a public lands related bill closely with Caroline County. One of the issues that they've been having, and I know some other Eastern Shore counties have been having, is that for their program of space local side, They do acquisitions. Once they have met their goal for land acquisition that's set in a 5-year planning process, they can use up to 75% of that money for doing updates to the parks. So basically making them more user-friendly, working on things like trails and parking lots. We've been working with Caroline County, and we have a departmental bill that is going to include a provision to up that cap from 75% to 100%. So anything after they've met their goals, 100% of their program space open side funding will be able to go towards that kind of operations maintenance component, which I know is something that they've heard a lot from constituents, and we wanted to just brief you on. You will see that in a public lands bill that we have coming up this year. And then 2 funding related pieces. We received $1 million from the Middle Chesapeake Sentinel Landscape Resilience Project, and that'll go towards some easement purchases near Blackwater and Fishing Bay. And lastly, in the funding space, we received a grant from the EPA for $43 million. That's going to be spent entirely on the Eastern Shore. It's going to look at helping us to improve forest management on 1,000 acres, helping us develop a regional forestry management plan. So a hand in hand of sustainable forestry, habitat, and economic development for the lumber industry. And then we'll be looking at about 200 acres of marsh restoration for blue carbon projects, a wide range of different things. So just wanted to let you all know, and that is happening, and all those funds is going to be deployed on the Eastern Shore. And I think those are just a couple of the things that I wanted to flag and highlight for this body. And then I know there are several other topics that members had mentioned to me they wanted to discuss. So, Mr. Chair, I would turn it back over to you, and happy to answer any questions about those projects or anything else that the delegation would like to discuss today.
Okay, very good. If you don't mind, Mr. Secretary, and we brought this up last year in a similar setting, but when we were talking about the budget this year, the governor presented his budget this week. I guess I would have a general question to you as to how do you view the budget? Are you able to achieve your mission considering that version of it? And us being the legislature, any suggestions that you would make relationship to your priorities and whether funding needs to be improved through the lens of DNR? I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it's worth bringing up.
Yeah, happy to discuss. So yeah, I think when we look at our budget, we're very pleased with where we landed. The key funds that we need to move the natural resource work forward are in the budget for us. I think one thing that's unique about the Department of Natural Resources is that we're user pay, user benefit, right? So a lot of the funds that we have, the special funds, they come into the department and then they go directly into different things, whether that be program open space, the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Fund, waterway improvement. And so what we've seen because of that, it more or less insulates our department to some of the volatility related to the budget. So we are still going to be able to deliver on all of the priorities that we've been looking at, whether that be in the public lands, the restoration space, the local economic development space. We were able to, and I know MDOT's budget is tighter, so they had to pull some funds that go to the commercial oyster industry. We were able to restore that funding using some other pots of money at the department. So I think the great thing about the user pay, user benefit model is we're able to continue to move those funding sources forward because at the end of the day, we're working for specific constituents with how we spend that money.
Okay, I may have another question at the end, but let's pass the microphone off to some other members. Delegate Hutchinson.
Good morning. Thank you, Delegate Adams. Secretary, just curious where we are with the fishing pier in Cambridge.
Yep. So continuing to move along. I know we've gotten to a place where the city is comfortable with I think where we discussed at the meeting when we were all downtown. I think we still have the funding in our budget for this year and included. So for FY25, which we're in, and then for FY26, we're committed to the project. I think I'll follow up with Perry to see where we are, but I know he had been in touch with also I think the incoming mayor as well, just to make sure we were going to continue to have everybody's support in moving that forward. But looking forward to getting the only place where you can stand and fish deep water back up and running in the state of Maryland.
That's great news. So you anticipate we'll see demolition of the existing structure this year?
We're on track for that, Paul.
This calendar, Calendar 26, because we've gone through design.
You mean calendar, we're in 25.
Correct.
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
calendar year, we should see demolition.
FY 26.
FY 26. So second half of this year, we should see demolition.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing other members. If anybody's wanting to ask questions, now would be the time to do that. Okay, Delegate Jacobs.
I just briefly want to thank the secretary for his staff participating in the Waterman's Caucus this past Monday and hopefully this upcoming Monday. There were a lot of questions asked on some very pertinent topics, and we had 5 members of DNR participate, and they were able to answer most of the questions, and it was very helpful. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Delegate. Yeah, we're happy to continue to participate. And Mike's on here too. He was on Monday if there are other fisheries questions as well. So yeah, but thank you for the invite, and we're happy to continue to join.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Secretary, under DNR is the Power Plant Research Program. And, you know, I'm on Economic Matters Committee. We might have one of my other colleagues, with us. But during this legislative session, there's going to be conversation about nuclear. And, I've read this report in years past. And, we know what the mission of the report is, to protect our resources, but also make sure we have viable sources of energy moving forward. And I suppose my question is going to be, have we reviewed as a state, from your perspective, what these small modular reactors look like? And then obviously this is probably like a 10-year window. So we're talking today about something that may not be put in place for another 8-10 years. But, clearly through our Committee of Jurisdiction on Energy Policy, we've talked about this is sort of the future to advance, renewable goals. So you have to have the baseline nuclear power. But just if you would be willing to give us some thoughts on, that role with DNR and how you see that interfacing. Frankly, at the same time, we're worried about energy prices. And, to be honest with you, energy policy is no different than any other market. That's supply and demand, and prices follow. So, hopefully over the long run, we're taking some of the work that you and others are doing to, see, power plant projects, forward actually happen at the same time we're trying to protect our resources. So any thoughts or any comments, because this will be one of the top line issues coming out of my committee this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we evaluate at PPRP, when we're evaluating any project related to energy development, whether that be production or transmission, we're really looking at, specifically the impacts that it's going to have to whatever the resource is. And so, historically, when we looked at nuclear power, we were looking at a lot of water intake issues. They had to be cited by the water, right? Because they were used that for cooling. I think the exciting thing about the small nuclear reactors is that you aren't going to see those same kind of, resource heavy demands that we've seen in the traditional nuclear space. And so when we're doing these analysis, that's what we're looking at: water usage, impacts to water temperature, impacts to freshwater species, impacts to tidal species. And what you see with some of these much smaller types of infrastructure is you don't see those same types of large scale impacts. And so when we're doing these analysis, when Power Plant Research Program does those analysis, that's what we're going to be reflecting in those analyses, right? The scale of impact to the natural resources. And with these smaller, more distributed kind of modular reactors, we are seeing much less of an impact because they're not working at the same scale of kind of traditional nuclear.
Yeah. I think many citizens don't realize the important role that you and your department play in, researching that, because the lens of protecting our environment is the important aspect of that project, but it's also the recognition that energy policy needs to advance with citizens' demands. So thank you for the comments and the fact that you're working in that respect. And Mr. Secretary, I was waiting to see if there are other questions. I think we're in good shape, and we want to thank you for being with us today and answering some tough questions that relate to current events on the Eastern Shore. And I know you'll always be available for us as you have been with questions that may come from individual members. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad to come back at any point in time, and we will see many of you on the 2 p.m. briefing.
Okay. All right, next up, we have Maryland Department of Transportation. They're going to be here to speak very specifically and single subject on the Eastern Shore Rail P3 briefing. Members, they asked us to meet back before session back in November or December, and I chose not to do that primarily because I wasn't sure we'd have the turnout, and plus I think they wanted to take this time, so we're giving it to them the first session. So I'm looking for MDOT. Are we there?
Yes, sir. Jacqueline Hartman, Assistant Secretary for the Maryland Department of Transportation.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving us some time today. We want to come talk to you about a project that we have going over on the Eastern Shore, which is why we wanted to make sure that we bring it directly to this incredible team. And wanted to just kind of have general awareness so that you guys are aware of what is happening. And then, of course, work with you on any concerns or just general benefits that we want to talk through. So as mentioned, I'm Jacqueline Hartman, Assistant Secretary of Transportation Investments for the Maryland Department of Transportation, here on behalf of Secretary Wiedefeld, who sorry he could not be here with us today. Also with me is JT Thomas, who is our Director of the Office of Rail and Intermodal Freight. And so we have just a short slide deck we're going to kind of walk you through, and then be happy to answer any questions. I'm just going to share that real quick. Hopefully. Okay. I believe that is sharing now. Is that correct? Do you see the slide deck? Okay, thank you so much.
We're good.
All right, so the project we're here to talk to you about is this is the 4 rail lines that the Maryland Transit Administration owns on the Eastern Shore, currently owned or currently operated by the Maryland and Delaware Railroad Company. We are looking to, so currently these are operated under an operating lease, a long-term operating lease. We're looking to move that into a public-private partnership model. And that is what we want to kind of come walk you through today and kind of explain that a little bit, kind of what that means and how that's going to be a better delivery model and a better operating model for these rail lines moving forward. Sorry, I'm not on Zoom as much, so I just had a little extra time to get used to the sharing. So the 4 rail lines I mentioned, and JT will walk through them a little bit more in depth, but 4 rail lines on the Eastern Shore. Currently, there is a total of 92 miles of rail line, and 65 of those are in active use. As you guys may be familiar, we've had maintenance issues on those rail lines, and at times that is disruptive to the business operations that happen on those rail lines. So as the current long-term operating lease is expiring, we are thinking long-term about how do we not only have an operator long-term, but also how do we improve the service delivery on those routes? How do we ensure that we have better maintained tracks so that businesses who rely on those tracks are really able to continue their operations without any interruption? And also, how do we think, long-term strategically about other business opportunities that could take advantage of those rail lines that may not be today? And so we are looking at a public-private partnership model. In many ways, it's not going to be that much different in the day-to-day in how we're operating today. Today, MTA owns these lines and they are operated by MGDE. And so in the future, that will be a similar model that we will have an operator. However, in the future, the operator would also, they would be a kind of a stronger partner to the state in terms of how they will have enhanced decision-making authority for how those rail lines are utilized and maintained. We will have performance measures to ensure that those lines are maintained to a state of good repair. We will also have you will continue with having a long-term contract so that both the operator as well as the state are really kind of have a long-term plan for these rail lines. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that we're kind of lacking today under the current operating model. So we have an operator who, is doing the operations day to day. We have the state who has the responsibility for the maintenance of the tracks. MTA is very focused on moving people and not always on moving freight. And so, there are times when we are not thinking strategically long-term about those rail lines and how it can really enhance the use of those rail lines and how can we ensure that they are well maintained. By moving to a public-private partnership model and kind of resting all of that authority with one entity rather than today kind of being split between the operator and the state, that's going to give the private operator a better ability to kind of have that strategic long-term vision of how can they maintain the tracks and operate them, as well as seek other business opportunities in a way that's really going to grow opportunities there. So we do see this as a win-win, kind of all around the board. From the private operator side, it kind of lets them set their own fate a little bit more. And from the state side, it is going to result in a better maintained system as well as additional growth opportunities in terms of both business growth and job growth. And so the key difference is really, as I talked about, kind of that change in decision-making authority. We would also expect that the private operator would invest some of their own money in these rail lines to get these tracks back to a state of good repair and then maintain it. And then they would have the ability to keep those revenues in the future, and that is how they get the return on their investment. So we are bringing in a piece of it of kind of private financing of those projects that is not there today. And so in Maryland, there is a specific process that that we have to go through to pursue public-private partnerships. There's a specific P3 law. It first requires a pre-solicitation report, which basically just lays out what is our plan for the project. That pre-solicitation report was submitted to the legislature on October 9th for review. So as the chair mentioned, that is when we first reached out to you guys just to kind of make sure that there was good awareness of the project as it was moving through the process. There is a 45-day review and comment period by the legislature. We did end up hearing back from the budget chairs just to kind of decline to, they were going to let the 45 days lapse without comment. So it would essentially, allowing us to continue to move forward. We have also worked closely with Departments of Agriculture and Commerce, as well as the State Treasurer's Office, to ensure that all parties are aware of this project moving forward and to take in any input about how the project moves forward. Once that 45 days elapsed, the next step of the process requires us to go to the Board of Public Works and get approval to move forward as a public-private partnership. So this is really just a designation in the beginning of the process, make sure that everybody's aware that's what we're going to do it. And that approval was granted by the Board of Public Works on December 18th. So from there, that kind of allows the department to move forward with the actual solicitation. So at that point, that is when we start to engage with private industry and move forward with the solicitation and really work toward kind of getting somebody on board, negotiating a contract, and then moving into operations probably sometime near the end of this year or even early next year. So the steps that have been taken to date are really kind of the first fundamental foundational steps. But there is plenty more to go, plenty other steps to go. So look forward to continuing to engage with the foundation project. And so when we think about public-private partnerships and about this project specifically, it is most closely resembling the Secret Marine Terminal public-private partnership that the department undertook in 2008. So by all accounts, this has been a hugely successful project, and this one is going to be mirrored much after that. So in that deal, we previously had a private operator of our port terminal at Secret Marine Terminal at the Port of Baltimore. We moved that into a public-private partnership model where we solicited it to have a long-term in this case, 50-year private operator come on board. They invested money up front in the Seagirt Marine Terminal so that we could have the deep 50-foot berths available at the port and be ready to take on these larger ships that started traversing through the Panama Canal. And then they are now operating the facility for a 50-year term. And so that was Ports America Chesapeake that came on board to be our operator in that case. By all accounts, this has been just a tremendous success. We've grown container business significantly at the port since Ports America came on board. And we have continued to see a lot of new opportunities come on board as well. So very much so, this will be that same general concept that we're going to bring to these Eastern Shore rail lines of, what was just an operating lease, really bringing somebody on board that is investing in the facility, making those long-term strategic decisions, and really growing the business. And so we do see this as an opportunity for the department, for the Eastern Shore, for the state, to really to make the best use of these rail lines that we have on the Eastern Shore. Similar to the Seagirt deal, we would be looking at a long-term framework. In this case, probably 40 years, but somewhere around there. Ultimately, that ends up being part of the financial calculations of ensuring that because the private sector is going to be investing in that project, investing their money in the project, ensuring that they have time to get a return on investment. There will also be performance goals to ensure that they are maintaining the facility the way we would expect. And there will also be some risk sharing. So today, the state has the full responsibility of the risk for any issues with the rail lines. In the future, that would be a shared risk. So if the private sector is failing to properly maintain the facility and there are any issues on the facility, that responsibility really falls to them. However, obviously, because of the performance measures, we would also have close oversight of that to prevent that from happening. But we do see this as, really kind of seeing that strategic vision and looking long term for these rail lines as a much better option. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to JT to talk to us a little bit more about the existing rail lines and then just what the opportunities we see in the future for growth potential here.
Great. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Hartman. Good morning, Chair Adams, delegation members. Can everybody hear me okay? All right.
Yes.
So a couple
Yes,
more
we
slides
can.
for context here. These corridors are all on Eastern Shore, obviously. There are 4 lines, north to south, the Chestertown line running from Delaware west towards Wharton and Kent County and down towards Chestertown. The Centerville line branches south from that Chestertown line from the top of Kent County and runs down into Queen Anne's County, ends southern Queen Anne's County, ultimately just east of Centerville. Then the other line is down, runs west-east from Cambridge and Dorchester County, runs through Federalsburg and Caroline County. All of these lines interchange back with lines in Delaware. There's more than 16 active shippers in 2024 representing key Maryland businesses and key Eastern Shore businesses. Highlights include Purdue Agribusiness, Eastman Chemical, Dart Container, many more, many of the largest employers in those counties over there. Additional shippers are there that may or may not have active service because of state of good repair, line, or volume. In 2024 and before, approximately $100 million a year in freight goods moved over these state-owned corridors, and that has been growing. We had over 3,000 rail carloads in 2024, and obviously opportunity to move more. Next slide. As Ms. Hartman said, over 92 miles. More than half of those are active right now. There are other sections of those lines that are ready for service but need to be upgraded from a state of good repair perspective, and in partnership with a future operator, we can talk through what it would take to get more of these lines. One of the other things we do with some of these active lines on the Eastern Shore, include in those counties I mentioned, plus in Talbot County, is what we call rail banking. And that is putting agreements in place to preserve those rail corridors in state ownership, but also preserve them for future return of rail service. Well, what we don't want to have is an inactive corridor with nothing going on. So what that can do is allow for interim use, whether that's utility corridors, whether that's shared use path conversion in an interim basis, in the hope that ultimately rail service will return. So our goal is to have something assigned, whether it's active rail service or rail banked awaiting return of active rail service at all times for these corridors. From a state of good repair perspective, there's significant investment needed to get these lines up into a maximum level of condition benefit so that heavier loads and more loads can run. So as Ms. Hartman said, partnering with a long-term operator to leverage any of those future federal funds or other partnership funds is very important. Next slide. Just a quick refresh as to what we've done to date. We've had an operating contract with Maryland Delaware Railroad since 2008. MTA retains the responsibility for capital investments in that existing conditions as bridge repairs and upgrades. And as Ms. Hartman said, a new PTU operating contract will allow us to share that responsibility going forward. And let's go to the last slide. These short line railroads are a key part of the transportation network for moving goods. Certainly in the last few years, it's become even more competitive. Rail freight on the Eastern Shore, for every one of those 3,000 carloads, that's worthy of 3.5 to 4 trucks. So a safer and lower cost alternative, knowing where these shipments are on the lines there at all times is a good, safe way to do things. We anticipate the demand for all those Maryland businesses to move these freight dependent goods to increase. And obviously with adequate investment, the rail revenue can grow and become more sustainable. The idea here is also to allow that private partner to invest revenue back into the track. So if we have sections of state of good repair challenged track that could benefit from upgrades, we want that revenue to be able to go back into that track, right? So MDOT looks forward to a long-term partnership with the jurisdictions, with the delegation, and with a future operator. And with that, I will pass things back to you, Chair Adams, to facilitate questions.
Members, are there any questions? And this will be directly related to the presentation. I'm sure we have a lot of questions we could ask MDOT about other things, but this is a single subject. So grant everybody a minute to ask questions. Okay. So let me just say thank you for your patience, for allowing us to do it during session. You got pretty much the entire delegation here that listened in, and I think I understand. The only question I would have would be, is there any action you're looking at from the delegation on this, or is this information such that if we get questions from constituents or so just help me make sure that we're leaving this meeting with any action items you're wanting from us.
Question. So yes, we really just wanted to share information in this case. We are, based on the legislative process with the pre-solicitation report and then the Board of Public Works approval that we did, we are continuing to advance this project. But because we recognize the importance of these rail lines on the Eastern Shore, we wanted to make sure that we keep this group involved and, collaborate with you guys if there are any concerns or any specific areas that we need to address. We're happy to do that. But we are going to continue to move forward. You will see in the next couple of months, we'll start to do some industry outreach as well as move forward on a RFP to bring in the private operator. And then by the end of the year into early next year, look to seek Board of Public Works approval for the actual contract itself. So we will keep you updated through that process, just because of the, again, the importance of these rail lines on the Eastern Shore. But no definitive action required from the delegation, but happy to work with anybody as the project progresses and keep you updated.
Very well. We do have a question. Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this presentation and the fact that you do recognize the importance of these freight lines, especially to our farm community and agriculture, both for inputs and moving our produce and products out. It's very important to maintain these systems, and I think it's a win-win for as we try to provide jobs and other things that require heavy amounts of materials. So I think it's a win. Thank you, and I hope you work the issues out and it goes forward.
We appreciate that. Yeah, we agree. We think it's a win-win for all parties.
Jacqueline and John, thank you for the presentation today.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, and we're moving quicker on the calendar here, Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I'm Liz LaCourte. I'm going to share my screen. I am the Chief Advancement Officer of the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. Can you see my screen?
Not just yet.
Nope. Hang on.
Now we're in.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Thank you, Delegate Adams. I appreciate it. I have with me our incoming board vice chair, Jeff Vogel, and also chair of our government relations committee, and our chief historian, Pete Lesher, who will be giving you our presentation today. And then we'll follow up with questions. I'll turn it over to Jeff. Jeff, you're on mute. We don't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the members of the Eastern Shore delegation. We're tremendously grateful for the opportunity to be here today and provide an update on the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum located in beautiful St. Michael's, Talbot County. As Liz said, I'm Jeff Vogel. I'm the incoming vice chair and honored to serve as a member of the board of governors of the museum. Pete will give you, a detailed overview of our mission and how we achieve the same. But at a high level, the museum offers a unique hands-on learning experience, providing really unparalleled opportunities for visitors to engage in the history and culture of the Chesapeake Bay, and in particular, the Eastern Shore. We serve as stewards of the bay's history, ensuring the protection and preservation of irreplaceable collections, providing public access to our collective regional history for generations to come. We provide in-person and virtual learning experiences for children of all ages, and ensuring that the next generation has an appreciation for our region and the Eastern Shore's rich history and culture. Through our working shipyard, we preserve and develop critical shipwright skills while also preserving historic vessels out of the Chesapeake Bay. And ultimately, through this work, we serve as a key economic driver for the Eastern Shore. We're really here today to give an update on our capital requests and respectively request the Eastern Shore's delegation's support for that capital request. As people discuss, we have a really critical need to replace aging HVAC systems in two of our major buildings that house irreplaceable collections. We certainly understand the budget challenges that the state is facing, but this is really a time-sensitive, critical need to ensure that these irreplaceable artifacts are not lost to time, and that future generations will be able to enjoy the history of the Eastern Shore and the Chesapeake Bay. But let me turn it over to Pete, our chief historian, who will give you just a full rundown on our mission.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to the delegation for the opportunity here. Since we opened our doors in 1965, we've been exploring and preserving the history, environment, and culture of the Chesapeake Bay and sharing this resource. We do this, we're certainly a heritage tourism attraction for the shore and a museum about place, but we're also truly a community museum. And I'm going to show examples of this as we go along. We are in 12 exhibition buildings on a 20-acre waterfront campus where we have preserved now 90,000 objects, historic photographs, ships plans, oral histories of decoy carvers and watermen and shipbuilders and crab pickers and more, stories about people on the shore and stories about how this place has shaped the culture on the shore. Images and objects like a shipbuilder's toolbox from Chesapeake City, a full-size skipjack, the Rosie Parks from famed Dorchester County boat builder Bronza Parks, objects from and images from Rock Hall waterman and boat builder Stanley Van Sant, the contents and oral history from the Crisfield seafood packing houses. It goes on. All of that is accessible online. Visitors, researchers can search all of those collections online. Our educational mission plays out in a number of ways. We have a robust pre-K through 12 schools program where we provide bus scholarships to help bring students for districts who don't have the resources to help them get to the museum for our curricular-oriented programs where we have curricular ties. We've worked with teachers to ensure that we are meeting learning goals in science, in reading, and in social studies. Our educational programs play out in other ways, including our state-certified shipwright apprentice program, essentially a trade school, a state-recognized trade school for wood and boat building. And our graduates, we just graduated 2 more in December, are getting placements. They are finding work in the trade that we've trained them for. It's not just wood and boat carpentry, but allied industries, including welding, metal casting, related skills that we, through a partnership with Chesapeake College, ensure that they get as part of their training. Our Rising Tide After School program, and one of our triumphs with that program, which starts in the 6th grade, goes through 12th grade, is that one of our longtime participants just became our newest shipwright apprentice, going into that trade school program. We serve kids in so many ways, including our summer camp as well. Let's go on to the next. Our exhibitions, as I mentioned, are in those 12 waterfront exhibition buildings on our 20-acre campus. Many of those are long-term exhibitions that serve the 80,000 visitors that visit us every year. In addition to those, however, we are also doing changing exhibits, exploring current topics, including our newest exhibition that opened in September, Sailing to Freedom: Maritime Dimensions of the Underground Railroad. It seemed clear to us, but perhaps not, but this is relatively new research that, of course, in a place like the Chesapeake Bay, that freedom seekers would have used the waterways and not just overland routes to find freedom in the North. We continue to do that. We welcome visitors, in particular on festival days. You'll see a couple of those illustrated here, particularly our Souls at Sea program in the lower right there. But so many of the other ways that we serve our community through programming. Our Folk Life Center is the engine through which we gather a lot of the oral history, but also how we assist other nonprofits that are preserving history around to back up their collections, to scan their large format collections that they might not otherwise be able to preserve digitally. We do this through a series we bring this to the public through a series of festivals, eight of them through the year. A number of you I know have been there for our Watermen's Appreciation Day, a partnered event with the Talbot Watermen's Association, where we welcome often 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people for a single day to learn about the work of the watermen and to enjoy the bounty of the bay. We have special occasions for teachers and for first responders and so forth throughout the year. Yes, we can move on, Liz. Jeff mentioned our economic impact, and we measured this just on the eve of the pandemic, showing that that with CBMM generated visits, not people who come to St. Michael's and happen to the museum, but people who plan to come to St. Michael's because of the museum, and what they spend in restaurants and overnights and shopping in the area. And we found that we measured that there's an $11.6 million impact to Talbot County, $5.8 million to the entire state of Maryland. Now, why is that state figure lower? Because some of those visits are from the Washington area, some of those visits are from the Baltimore area, and we subtract those out. It's a demonstration of what an economic driver the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum is for Talbot County and for heritage tourism on the Eastern Shore in general. So we are here to ask for your support, as Jeff said, for two of those exhibition buildings, exhibition and programming buildings. Actually, the Steamboat Building is one of the major venues where we carry on a lot of our programming with our Van Lennep Auditorium. Both of these buildings have aging systems, one with fossil fuel fired boilers and the other on electric. We hope that we can replace these with far more efficient systems, reducing our our environmental footprint and driving down our operating costs. These are at simply a life cycle point. HVAC and climate control in a museum is important not only for visitor comfort, but also for object preservation, to ensure that these collections continue to be around, to be available for future generations, to tell the stories that we're telling now, so that people are inspired to care for the Bay and to care for the cultures that have been shaped by the Bay. Please give us a favorable look as you are making your very difficult budget decisions in this year's session. Thank you so much for your time, and I think we'll pause for any questions or toss it back to you, Liz.
Well, let me just say, Pete, thank you so much for the overview. And I just want to take a moment before we jump into questions to invite all of you to visit our campus, explore our exhibits, engage in our educational and cultural programs. We're happy to coordinate with your respective staffs for official visits. And really just truly appreciate, again, the time that you've taken to listen to us today and your consideration for this important capital request. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you, and we're happy to answer any questions.
So, yeah, we do have a question, and let me just say, I'm going to reinforce and emphasize that this is a very difficult budget.
Can't figure out that printer.
What's that? It's a very difficult budget season this year, and
I just cancel everything I sent to it.
A series. I mean, somebody else is talking. I don't know if they need to put their microphone on mute. So I'm sorry, Liz, Jeff, and Pete. Let me just say my piece on this. This is an exceedingly difficult budget year, unlike any that I've had in the past 10 years. This is my 11th legislative session. So the exercise of requests, and of course we'll support you, but man, oh man, the nature of what's happening right now, and the dialogue that appears to be moving forward with tax increases, and just the scale of the difference of what we need as a state in the budget versus what the priorities are. And I'll share the message with you as a delegation. I mean, you are not just a asset for Talbot County or the Eastern Shore, but you are a state asset, and you tell an important story, as we surely know that, and want to thank you for everything you're doing, and just wanted to say that piece.
Thank you.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and definitely applaud all your efforts there. Fantastic museum. And, staying in that same vein of environmental stewardship, I'd like to put on my nerdy mechanical engineering hat for a moment. Just as a heads up, 2025 marks the first year that there's a movement now to what's called A2L refrigerants. All new HVAC systems are required to transition to that in the next 2 years. So when you're looking at those systems, make sure that they are the new class of compliant, because the 410 older refrigerant can still be sold for another year. So make sure you're getting that latest, greatest. Less ozone depletion and friendlier on the environment. So let's stay with that same theme that you've got going there, saving the bay. And hats off to all your efforts. I know HVACs are a big problem, having worked in the museum space for many years in the Hill. So keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thank you
Thank you very much. I've made a note of that, and we'll make sure that we're getting the state of the art. We don't want to be building obsolete systems. Thank you.
A2L is the designation. Thanks.
Okay, Senator Mounts.
Just very quickly, I needed to just wanted to take an opportunity to say thank you for taking the time to share all this with the delegation this morning. It's great to see everybody, being from St. Michael's, living in St. Michael's, doing business in St. Michael's, our family business. I just would reiterate the significance and the impact that the museum has had, not just on the area, but throughout the state of Maryland. It is a East Coast landmark for maritime museums, and we're very proud of all of your accomplishments.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your support, Senator Mounts.
Okay, not seeing any further questions, and Liz, Jeff, and Pete, thank you for the presentation. We go often, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next up is the Maryland Eastern Shore Trail Network. Owen Bailey, Patty Stevens, you're up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the delegation, for your time this morning. My name is Owen Bailey. I'm the Director of Land Use and Policy for the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, as well as Chair of the Maryland Eastern Shore Trail Network and a resident in Kent County. With me is Patty Stevens, who is another member of our committee. Patty.
Good morning. Patty Stevens. I am the chair of the Worcester County Bike and Pedestrian Coalition and also the Eastern Shore representative to Maryland's Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And for the last 3 years have been on the steering committee of the Maryland Eastern Shore Trail Network. And thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Patty. I will share our presentation. Okay, is everyone able to see this? Great. So we have created this Eastern Shore Trail Network group to help our local governments on the Eastern Shore with strategies and visions for a trail network. Our vision is to connect our shore communities through a safe and sustainable trail network. And our mission is to help galvanize a coalition of communities and support them in planning and promoting and advocating for a diverse trail system. A quick history on how we were started in April 2022. Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, as part of our planning conferences, hosted a conference at Chesapeake College to talk about trails and the value they bring. And in leading up to that, we interviewed staff from each county and municipality on the Eastern Shore to understand their vision for trails. And what we saw was that most of our jurisdictions were excited about trails, and they wanted to learn more on how to create trails and plan for more trails in their communities. So we hosted this conference, and we had about 100 attendees, representatives from each of our jurisdictions, and we had overwhelming support. We had great representation from MDOT and from the National Park Service, from Parks and Rec groups like Somerset County Parks and Rec. And what we heard at the end of the workshop, this was meant to just be a one-day conference, that was it, was that there was an interest, but also a need from our communities to provide technical assistance and support. One thing we learned from our jurisdictions throughout the process is our smaller municipalities on the Eastern Shore, they wanted more trails, but they lacked the capacity, the expertise, and the funding to plan, develop, and design for trails. So, Patty?
As Owen said, both prior to this first workshop and over the next year or so, we have done a lot of research on what other regions and states are doing to support their trail networks and how they've been implemented, what the data showed. The look we took was somewhat alarming. We have, while the Eastern Shore, the 8 counties that have been involved in this process represent 30% of the state's landmass and are the area of most significant visitorship for recreation and economic development impact. We have only 9.2% of the state's road separated trails. And that is the kind of trail you see in the picture versus we have trails in parks, in our state forests, in our local parks. We have small loop trails that are often natural surface. But to really connect places, to connect towns, to connect places like the wonderful Chesapeake Maritime Museum and let people get to those on not in their cars requires road separated trails. And this deficit really came to light when MDOT did the update of the state 5-year bike and pedestrian plan. They did an interactive mapping and it showed the off-road trails across the whole state. And the visual that impact that was to me was in more urban areas, Baltimore, Annapolis, around the DC metro area. Those green trails that were off-road trails looked like plates of robust pesto spaghetti. And on the Eastern Shore counties, we had little flecks of parsley. We have, small 2 to 3 mile trail segments like we have at Assateague Island. The lovely trail between our state park and the national park is really the only off-road trail in Worcester County besides our boardwalk, the boardwalk in Ocean City. And those are both wonderfully well-used recreational areas, but they are not connectors to other places. They are, and that's what we really saw that we have a deficit of. So next slide, Owen. The benefits of trails, we also participated now. This is a national priority. The workshops and regional planning and state planning efforts are going on across the country. And as we've participated in the Rail Trail Nation that the Rail Trail Conservancy has created and that the East Coast Greenway has created, we've learned a lot about the impacts and positive benefits of trails, not just, but importantly to economic development, but to health, to safe alternative transportation. Our friends in Somerset County and Clint Sterling is a participant in the regional trail, our regional trail steering committee. He actually obtained CDC funding for that Westover to Chrisfield Trail as part of the funding package he put together, because they could demonstrate that having access to off-road walking and biking areas would positively impact the high rates of obesity, heart disease, diabetes in their community, and from an equity perspective, that it would create safe alternative transportation for communities that have higher rates of non-car household or shared car for one household. That trails allow people to, not just for fun and recreation, but they're actually used by people to get to jobs, to get to essential services. And we certainly see that in my home county of Worcester County, where through this snow and ice, I see people on scooters and bikes and walking to go from there where the more affordable available housing is to the jobs in the hotels and restaurants and businesses in the Ocean City area. Trails also are a tremendous benefit to preserving access to open space and preserving public corridors and easements that have been in place for hundreds of years. Our friends from in the earlier presentation on the rail lines, we have worked with Thomas McKay and JT JT who spoke to you about the rail line corridors that are available on the Eastern Shore, and how we can look at rail with trail along those rail lines that may still be active, and develop rail trail conversions in those rail lines that are abandoned or no longer inactive, and that preserves open space and transportation connectivity. But the most significant impact, I think, is the economic growth that trails can bring. Recreation tourism and agritourism are the fastest growing segments for travelers around the country. And our economic development coordinator, Melanie Purcell, brought this bullet point back to us from a national conference. And access to recreational amenities is highly valued by people there. It's a decision maker for companies that are relocating their businesses. They want to have access to these kinds of trail activities. And it's of high value to people that are remotely working. They want to be able to get out and use trails for recreation and transportation.
So why create a regional trail network? As I mentioned earlier, we recognize the limited capacity that a lot of our local governments have, and the how much they're under pressure just to maintain the services that they provide. And we also understand how sort of segmented our local governments are, towns and counties. And one of the real values that comes from trails is their connectivity, to go from municipality to municipality, to go across county lines. And there was a space for a group like Maryland Eastern Shore Trail Network to step in to help connect our local governments together in planning and coordination, to help fill in that capacity, to create an inventory of existing trails and plan trails that you find in master plans and comprehensive plans, to identify the gaps that are missing between our towns and our parks and historic sites. I think about Tuckahoe State Park and how many communities you have that are so close to it, but those communities are not able to access one of the gems of the Eastern Shore unless they're in a car, which disenfranchises huge sections of the population that either are too young to drive, too old to drive, or not physically or financially able to drive. So we envision this group as something that can step in, help secure funds and capacity to help advocate for the benefits of trails in the region. One thing we've been successful in doing, the rail line that leads from Preston down through East Newmarket, Hurlock, and up into Cambridge was an inactive rail line. And we were able to help connect the local governments with MDOT and the rail office to help coordinate the preservation of that line through rail banking. And happy to report that today, Dorchester County stepped up to the plate and agreed to be the rail sponsor. So that line is preserved. A section of it from Washington Street in Cambridge to Woods Road is being planned to be converted into an active trail, while the rest of it is preserved so the one-day rail line service could return and could also be a rail with trail. We have also worked with DNR Office of Outdoor Recreation, the Departments of Planning, Commerce, and DHCD. DHCD has been a great support of ours in helping to fund the work that we've done. So the Maryland Eastern Shore Trail Network, our vision is really to do four things: convene, plan, advocate, and communicate. To help convene our local governments and trail advocates and champions, we've hosted 2 regional events, 4 trail events, and have met monthly since June 2023 with support from the National Park Service. We were successful in getting a technical assistance grant through their Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. We have helped in planning to, as I mentioned, collect the data of the rail lines of the trails on the Eastern Shore, which is extremely helpful now as the state is developing a statewide trail plan. Because we've been so active and so successful in gathering our data, we are sort of at the forefront of that effort, and our data is more complete than other parts of the state. We've advocated on the benefits of trails with groups like Bike Maryland, the Maryland Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Patty and I both spoke at the Forever Maryland Land Conference this past fall. Patty spoke at the first ever Outdoor Recreation Summit this past fall as well. We've helped as technical assistants with the bike and pedestrian master plan for the state. And are active on the Maryland Trail Subcommittee. We're also working to communicate the value that trails bring to our communities. We have a new website, we have a new logo, social media accounts, fact sheet, and a communications plan, all really to help galvanize the Eastern Shore behind this great effort. Patty?
Community outreach has been a really fun part of this initiative, and one that's very rewarding, from things like being at county fairs, where I got to meet with many people in Worcester County, being at the Culture Fest in Cambridge, at events that we hosted as the Regional Trail Network on Celebrate Trails Day in April and on National Trails Day in June. Some of you were participants in those trail walks that we hosted, including Senator Carrozza. And we were able to work with towns and counties to have Celebrate Trails Day proclamations signed, and these locations that you see in the chart. I'm grateful to our leadership, including Commissioner Chip Bertino, who helped facilitate those. We had a few minutes in front of those commissions to seek their support and receive very, very positive proclamation support, not just for local trails, but for the concept of a regional trail initiative. Next slide.
Wow,
Next slide.
Don't know why it's not advancing. Oh, there we go.
Okay, so Owen talked about our work with this as part of the state trail mapping initiative, and through our National Park Service support and in collaboration with the Midshore Regional Council. Scott Warner helped connect us with the Eastern Shore GIS Cooperative at Salisbury University, and the Andrew Burnish from MDOT and the Eastern Shore Cooperative helped us develop this multi-layered map that shows trails, some of trails of which have been on plans. We found a trail atlas called the Greenways Atlas that was produced actually in 1992 as a collaborative effort between DNR and MDOT, and presented to the governor and the legislature at that time. And there were trail segments on that we've been discussing recently, thinking these were our ideas more recently, and they've actually been on the books as ideas and proposed connectors for more than 30 years. And so you'll see on this map, and I encourage you to take a look at it, that it's going to be a working document as we identify new segments. And as, for example, the existing trails, which is the parsley I talked about on this map, show up in purple instead of green. So you'll see little loop trails, the segment in Assateague and the segment up in Queen Anne's County and in Kent County. But then look at our vision and the planned trails, like a potential connection on a rail corridor between Berlin and Snow Hill is one that's in discussion. And the one that Owen talked about in this center of the county in Talbot and Dorchester County. Those planned trails and trail corridor opportunities really will require the collaboration of multiple jurisdictions, of DNR, of MDOT, of multiple. It will be a significant lift. The good news is, especially given the state budget challenges here in Maryland, is that there still is federal money available for infrastructure projects, including specific set-asides for what's called active transportation or active recreation. But those federal dollars are most often awarded not to small 1 and 2 and 3 mile projects, but to bigger, longer, more impactful projects that are connectors and that have a larger economic and population impact. So that's really one of our significant goals, is to use this map and this vision to secure that kind of funding and capacity to move this from parsley to a pesto plate of spaghetti of trails that connect our wonderful Eastern Shore communities.
So our ask today is just to help us promote the benefits of trails and highlight the wonderful existing trails that we have on the Eastern Shore, the Cross Island, South Island Trail, the trail in the town of Easton, Somerset County, and to support our communities in the planning and development of their trails. We're not taking the position of telling communities where they should have trails. We're just advocating for the benefits of trails and helping them in their own planning efforts. So we're also asking you to help with regional coordination for sustainable project management and to help prevent cuts to state funding. Before the pandemic, funding for the Bikeways program was almost doubled, and then it was cut in half last year. And this funding is crucial to help us get match funding for all these available federal dollars that are out there. Our current coalition members include Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, Talbot Thrive, which is a nonprofit advocacy group in Talbot County, Worcester County Bike and Pedestrian Coalition that Patty founded and heads, Move Salisbury, Somerset Trail Mix from the Somerset County Department of Parks and Recreation, Queen Anne's County Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Caroline County Department of Tourism, and our heritage areas on the Eastern Shore, which have been very supportive of our work. So our next step is to develop a sustainable organizational structure and find funding to hire a full-time staff member that can be that added capacity for our local governments, that can help find grants, apply for grants, help advocate for more funding at the state level, to help identify federal dollars, and to support our communities in helping them to add trails to their comprehensive plans, to develop bike and pedestrian advisory committees. Queen Anne's County has a bike and pedestrian advisory committee. Talbot County just established one. We need more of them in each of our counties to help add that advocacy capacity, to include trails in our transportation priority letters, and to develop master plans. Queen Anne's County just finalized their master plan this past fall. Worcester County will be the next county to do so, and to help participate in trail planning initiatives. Patty?
This trail development work is a long, slow haul. It takes years. We look at examples in Pennsylvania, like the Great Allegheny Passage Trail, which is a 150-mile trail along former rail lines from Cumberland, Maryland to Pittsburgh. That planning began in the 1990s, and only in the last 5 years have they completed their last miles of segments. But that was done through regional efforts and with significant efforts from the state. When we look more closely for inspiration and for examples of how we can work more effectively for regional trail development, we have to look north to Delaware, where if you've seen the beautiful trail around between Rehoboth and Cape Henlopen State Park, and the connection loop, that Broadneck State Loop. DelDOT led the planning, design, and secured the construction funding to connect that section on the shore through Lewis and Georgetown, with the Georgetown to Lewis Trail. And they've currently are completing 11 miles of that. It will eventually be 17 miles of that connection that will bring the inland people from Georgetown and provide them access to this beautiful trail loop and economic opportunities. And similarly, to the south of us, VDOT has been very active and involved in the development of the rail trail corridor on Virginia's Eastern Shore. Those of you that have traveled south may see that those rail lines have already been pulled up. Those wooden trails repurposed. They actually were able to sell that material at a profit to a salvage company from out west. And grading has already begun, and in some cases the pavement is underway for the middle section, that purple section, with a $23 million federal raised grant that was secured by the Northampton Accomack Regional Planning District. And that example of having a regional transportation planning district is really one that has resonated, and we've seen it. I heard about it in my role on the Train Commission, where we heard presentations from other state transportation departments, including North Carolina, where trail planning and bike and pedestrian planning is much more closely embedded with their capital planning and prioritization. And that's been with the help of regional transportation planning authorities, which is a model that we don't have here on the Eastern Shore, but could potentially have through our existing regional councils or some other body that could take more of a role in not just trail planning, but all transportation planning for the Eastern Shore region. We've also, as we mentioned, worked with our universities through the Eastern Shore GIS Cooperative and through the University of Maryland Eastern Shore Agritourism Enterprise. So there are models in places where regional trail planning could be housed and partnerships that could be developed. And we look forward to continuing those dialogues and to hearing from you on your thoughts on how we can be more effective. These are some photos of the existing beautiful trails we have, including one in the middle of our Summerfields Trail introduction at Pocomoke State Forest. That was on one of our Celebrate Trails Day events. So we thank you for your time this morning and look forward to your thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. I have questions in order, starting with Senator Croza.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, Patty. You've done amazing work coming up to Annapolis and educating, and the approach you're taking, which is the regional, pointing out that it's 8 counties on the Eastern Shore, and knowing that we have this budget crisis, and we have to be even more diligent about making our case. You gave us information at the beginning of this presentation that only 9.2% of the state's 1,235 miles of the trails that we only have that small percentage, but yet we're 30% of the state's landmass. That is the type of information where we as a shore delegation need to make the case on fairness. And my question to you is, since you reference the 8 counties and there was a lot of information on there, is there, are you coordinating on a regular basis with the counties that are already involved? And is that, as we identify specific funding sources, whether existing programs at the state level or the federal opportunities, make sure that we're also utilizing the Tri-County Council, which has been Greg Padgham and his team are very effective at leveraging federal dollars. I just want to know, can you explain how you're building out that 8 county partnership?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question, Senator Croza. So I'll start with we have worked with the Tri-County Councils. In fact, early on in our work, I reached out to Greg Padgham, and he and his staff helped us craft a grant application to the state that was a rural regional Maryland legacy grant. It ended up that Worcester County took over that grant and executed it as a way to, that's the funds that were used, the $100,000 that were used to develop our Worcester County Greenway and Trails Plan. So that was an example of how we reached out to Tri-County Council. Worcester County took over the execution of the grant, and we hope very soon, maybe next month, that trail plan will be approved by our county commissioners. On a regional level, we've continued conversations. There are federal dollars, including earmarks, including congressional earmark dollars, and federal money under the ATIP plan, which is part of the infrastructure bill, that we have a couple of projects that could be submitted for that, but they would need a regional host to do that grant application. And we will be continuing conversations with the Midshore Council, hopefully the Upper Shore Regional Council, on who the appropriate grant applicant would be. The other conversation that we have had is on continuing the coordination across multiple counties for where there are, the one I mentioned earlier, a Berlin to Snow Hill plan, potential rail trail connection would be 17 miles of some of the most heavily visited areas and not so heavily visited areas. But a grant like that is perfect for some of the funding, like raised federal grants or ATIP grants, and it would require an county leadership or potentially Tri-County Council leadership for that. I think we have the opportunity on the shore to look at a regional transportation planning model like other states have implemented that could really support the rail work that was discussed earlier, as well as roads, as well as trails. Thank you for your support.
Hey, Delegate Hartman. You're on mute. Wayne, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
How's that?
There you go.
Third time's the charm. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank you for the presentation. I need to jump off. I have another meeting in 2 minutes to get on, but Patty, I wanted to thank you for all your work here. I'm excited to hear that, how you're moving forward and expanding with staff and so forth. The seeing your parsley and spaghetti analogy makes sense. And when you think about the work you're trying to do with 611, connecting acetate and so forth, it just, all makes sense. And the presentation helps that come together. As you make these requests, make sure you keep Senator Cruz and myself aware so that we can follow up with letters of support when you're making these grant requests. And I can tell you we'll do whatever we can to support you in the effort. So thanks a lot. And I'm going to jump off the call. So take care, folks.
Thanks, Delegate Hartman.
Thank you.
In follow-up to Delegate Hartman's comment, I did want to mention that as trail projects are identified, considering who potential hosts could be for those projects, and Maryland Department of Transportation has a statewide trail planning initiative. They're going to look at regional trail projects. We'd like to put forth the Eastern Shore Regional Trail Project as a priority for them as they execute that state trail plan, because we're ready, positioned, and have the deficit that Senator Carrozza highlighted. So we'll be asking for your help with that request.
All right, Delegate.
That's exciting. Thanks again.
Yep. So sorry, Wayne. Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Owen and Patty, for the presentation. I'm on environment and transportation, and we hear quite a bit of conversation in our hearings on bike trails and biking in general. So I'm glad to see that there's this active of a effort on the shore. When I was looking at the map, it just didn't look like much in Kent County, and I know, I live in Rock Hall, and it's a very active area with bicycle clubs. I mean, for years and years and years, Vermont Bicycle Club's been here, Baltimore Bicycle Club, and I mean, they make it kind of a major hub of their tours. And I'm just curious, when you talk about communication, I mean, do you reach out to COG meetings, town meetings, county council? I'm just trying to understand, because it just seems like there's a lot of bike activity in parts of the shore that doesn't look like it's just a sprig of parsley.
But thank you, Delegate Jacobs. Yes, we have been active in reaching out to our local governments. I presented to town of Chestertown, to the Kent County Economic Development Committee, and we've also presented to the Kent County Commissioners. We have some beautiful landscapes on the Eastern Shore, especially some of our county roads. I love to ride my bike down Quaker Neck Road towards Pomona and then up towards Langford area. But some of those roads have no shoulders, and they're pretty dangerous, I would say, unless you are a very confident, strong cyclist. I've heard it said that women and children are a good indicator species of a safe and active bike trail. And when you look at our trails road separated trails are by far the most productive and safest for our communities. So while we do also want to promote cycling in our rural areas because we do have some beautiful places to cycle, we also want to promote trails that are more accommodating and accessible for those who aren't those road warriors.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just curious, and I understand that issue very well.
And Delegate Jacobs, and one way, as Owen listed on the how can you help us in those counties where you don't see as much activity, it's not because there aren't potential opportunities. Your assistance and your suggestion, if you know someone in that jurisdiction, either on the existing town councils or county commissions that you think we could connect with to have those conversations, we would welcome those introductions to move it forward in the counties where we don't have as strong a level of activity.
Thank you.
Delegate Sample Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation, and I will forever remember your analogy whenever I'm cooking. I'm thinking about parks or lack thereof and trails. So my question is regarding funding. You had mentioned about federal funding. Is there a average percentage of matching funds that is often required? And do they also require or allow in-kind matches? And if so, do you utilize or are you able to utilize like the efforts that the Tri-County Council and Mid-Shore Council and all those try to help as, you know, time put in to use as in-kind resources?
Thank you very much, Delegate. That's a great question. The range of match funding can be between 5 and at the high level 20%. I'll give an example of a grant that I worked with the town of Berlin to write to improve, to create a plan for a safe crossing across 113 that would reconnect the west side of Berlin to the east side of Berlin. That project, which is a $1.2 million grant from the Federal Reconnecting Neighborhoods Grant Fund, actually waived the grant match because that town of Berlin is designated as a historically underserved and transportation isolated community. Other projects that we have looked at, when we are looking at projects, we're looking with emphasis at those that could qualify for grants that have a lower or no match funding, but most of the state grants, for example, will require 20%. And to answer your question, yes, in-kind is allowed. For example, in another project that Dallas Baker in our Worcester County is working on with the 611 trail to connect Route 50 to the Assateague Island Visitor Center, his office in Public Works did some of the engineering and assisted with the preliminary design and outreach, and that level of effort is counted towards a percentage. Sometimes it does require money, and that's part of the planning that as we go to Worcester County, for example, we hope to ask Worcester County to look at in their budget resourcing for where could match funding come for when cash match is required in those grants. But the range of grants at the federal level, the examples I gave you in Delaware and in Virginia, those 17 and $23 million grants, those were matched by funds contributed from multiple jurisdictions that contributed to make that match, as well as effort that was contributed for the in-kind.
And I'll quickly add that we've had great support from some of our regional councils on the Eastern Shore. Mid-Shore Regional Council helped connect us with the Eastern Shore Regional GIS Cooperative at Salisbury University, which was essential to get our map started to help collect all that trail data that was, some of it was with DNR, some of it was with MDOT, some of it was just in old comprehensive plans or master plans, and they've been extremely supportive of us.
And that could count towards that continued support, not past support, but continued support could count towards level of effort for in-kind for matching.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Delegate Hornberger, last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just briefly, what I've noticed anecdotally in Cecil County is that we have a number of trails that, everyone knows about, everyone uses. They're on these large undeveloped parcels. However, they're not formally recognized, or there's no assigned right of way or designation for that trail. People continue to use them, and then maybe the property will change ownership, change hands, become developed, for example, and then that trail disappears. So one of the things that was brought up to me is that you can get rights of way and easements for these trails prior to transition of property, and that way they're preserved forever. And in some instances, these might be multimodal, people riding horses on them, just sort of this informal agreement. I didn't hear that mentioned in your presentation. How do we move in a direction where we're formalizing and preserving those trails forever, so they're not lost to developers?
That is an excellent question. Thank you. Other states have trail easement models. I'm thinking of the Carolina Thread Trail. They've been able to develop, I think, almost 400 miles of more natural surface trails across preserved properties through easements. Currently, the state of Maryland does not have an easement trail model that we can utilize. That's something we've been advocating for at DNR and Maryland Environmental Trust, so that land trusts like ESLC or the Cecil County Land Trust can utilize that to make those trails permanent and protected. And the Maryland statute on outdoor recreation protects landowners from liability. So long as you do not charge access to the trails, you are protected if somebody falls off their bike or sprains their ankle while they're running or using the trail. So, Maryland is well positioned to do that. We just need to take that extra step further to put that tool in our tool bag.
Is that a departmental fix, or is that a legislative fix, or both?
I believe it's just a departmental fix, but I work on the advocacy arm of ESLC. I'm not in the conservation arm, but so I can't say for sure, but I believe it's just a departmental fix.
Well, in some cases, we can legislatively spur activity when it's not being taken.
Yes.
So if you've got some language or another model in another state that we can help prompt the agency to do the right thing, I'd love for you to share that with us.
We'll do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Aaron's.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick question on electric bikes on the trails. Are you advocates for that, or are you getting a lot of questions?
That is a tricky subject, because we do want to allow for, because it's sort of a double-edged sword. Electric bikes are great for people who aren't as strong as they used to, so it gives them a little bit extra boost, or people who are commuting to work and they don't want to get to work all hot and sweaty from riding heavily. But they are an issue because of how fast they can go on trails. So I've seen in some trails that they have posted speed limits. Policing that always going to be an issue, just like policing speed limits on our roads is an issue. So that's something that we've not weighed in heavily, but we would like, we do recognize sort of the value in mobility devices.
And Delegate Owens, I'll add.
Oh, go ahead.
I'd add to that. We are tracking what the state is doing and the federal government is doing on their state parks and national parks. They have robust working groups looking at this issue. The approach that I know in our locality in Worcester County we've taken is it's not so much the device, it's the behavior. So what you're monitoring is speed, you're monitoring safe utilization, you're monitoring having a light at night, crossing at appropriate crossings, and enforcing and monitoring the behavior, and then limiting the usage to the class 3 electric vehicles, which are really closer to motorcycles than they are to bicycles. And so the problem is telling those apart from other e-bikes is very difficult now. The design looks very much like a regular bike. And so for law enforcement officers or DNR law enforcement, it's difficult to enforce that. But we are tracking that and following and learning from them.
We could use some help with that, because I'm getting a lot of calls about that, because we even have some delegates that have electric bikes that are concerned about that, Jacobs. But the thing is that we need to push that, because there are people, the elderly, that do need those, the assisted bikes. and they're not acting fast enough. So any help you could be on that. And again, you're right, there has to be criteria, but it needs to be addressed sooner than later. And I think with support from people like you, it would motivate them to go a little further. So if you don't mind, I'll use your name in vain.
I think we'll both
Please
be
do. Yes.
connectors to the experts. So
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that was a good discussion, and I believe all questions have been answered. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for yours.
Okay, so we are on to the federal updates. Now it's January 2025, and look forward to hearing from our friends. Let's start with Alyssa Hastings with Senator Van Hollen's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the delegation and guests. Bringing greetings to you all this morning from Senator Van Hollen and also from our new senator for the state of Maryland, Angela Alterbrooks. Bringing greetings from both of them this morning. Just a couple updates on the federal side. Just wanted the Senate is busy this week with ongoing confirmation hearings for appointments. As you all know, inauguration happening on Monday, so lots hustling and bustling going on over there. I wanted to just update you that so the deadline, we're still operating under the continuing resolution. The deadline for the fiscal year 25 appropriations is March 14th, and Senator Van Hollen is working actively to make sure that our congressionally directed spending requests that were approved for the Eastern Shore remain in that bill and that are approved and make it over that final hurdle over the finish line. And lastly, our office will be hosting webinars for this upcoming year's congressionally directed spending process, and those webinars will be next week. The one for nonprofits will be next Thursday at 11 a.m. and the one for local governments will be next Friday at 11 a.m. Both of those will be recorded and available on our website. So don't hesitate to reach out with any questions, and I'm here to help with anything I can do. Thanks.
Okay, Andy Harris's office. I think I got Jackie on the phone or online here.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a little trouble unmuting myself. Good morning, everyone. It's really good to see you all this morning. Want to start out by giving a shout out to Secretary Kurtz for his partnership on the blue catfish issue. We really appreciate his efforts on that issue. Also, Congressman Harris is monitoring the bird flu outbreak issue on the shore. You may have heard the NOAA Fisheries formally withdrew the proposed North Atlantic right whale vessel strike reduction rule, which would have had terrible economic consequences for our congressional district and for the Eastern Shore. This rule would have limited vessels larger than 35 feet from traveling faster than 10 knots. The reversal of that rule was supported by Congressman Harris because of the economic impact. He does realize the importance of preserving the North Atlantic right whale, but was very concerned about this economic impact it would have had on our district. And we also want to thank Delegate Hartman and Senator Carrozza for their leadership on that issue. You may have heard that the congressman was appointed chairman of the Agricultural Subcommittee within Appropriations and was recently appointed chair of the Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus put out their budget reconciliation plan and will be working on that with House leadership. The plan addresses debt ceiling increases coupled with savings, border security and defense funding, repealing Biden's EV mandate, repealing Biden's student loan bailout, moving Biden's funding for increased IRS agents to funding Border Patrol and ICE, and work requirements for able-bodied individuals to get SNAP and Medicaid benefits. And many of these initiatives had already passed Congress during the last session. They passed the House of Representatives. There's also discussion of executive action to review offshore wind, which President Trump opposes. And the congressman, I believe, is going to be with you next week and we'll be able to go into more details on these issues. If you guys need any assistance with anything, we're always there to help. So please reach out to our office. We appreciate all the interactions we have with all the delegates and senators working with constituents. So we're here to help. Thank you.
Okay, Alyssa and Jackie, thank you for the presentation. What I would ask is we certainly have a new senator coming on line or is already in office, Angela Osserbrooks, and our office is hopefully we've been trying to get up with their office to find out who the constituent liaison is going to be, or counterpart. So just please help us with that. The other thing I would share in that same regard is we'd love to hear from the senator, and you know, our list, our calendar of meetings is likely to be just a little bit shorter than it has been in years past. So the sooner we try to get that in this legislative session, the better, and hope to hear from her. So that just pass that message along to their office. I see a question from Delegate Hutchinson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And you may have answered it in a way, but this is really for Alyssa. You had spoke on behalf of Senator Brooks. So she has not filled her Eastern Shore liaison, or are you filling that role now?
She has not filled the position yet. She's hired a state director and a deputy state director at this point, and my understanding is they're in ongoing interviews and conversations, and that we should know in the next couple of weeks who will be filling that position. But in the meantime, I'm happy to help take any information back from the Senate side. But their office just wanted me to extend greetings from both senators today.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, federal friends. So anything for the good of the order before we move to adjourn from our members, This looks like our vice chair is raising a hand quick. Go ahead. Jay, I can't hear you.
So next week, if do you think we may be live, or do you think we're going to be doing Zoom again, or a combination thereof?
I believe that so as long as we are in this interim session, or whatever you call it, pro forma, we will likely remain on Zoom. That's the best answer I can give you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Senator Croza.
Mr. Chair, I thought you might just want to mention that the citations that were presented to Delegate Rudy Kane's family and to Senator Rich Colburn's families, that just to let our whole team here know. And I believe both Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes and Delegate Tom Hutchinson were involved in those presentations.
Thank you very much for that. And that's true. That's how that was presented. Okay, any other further comments? Okay, I need a motion to adjourn in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. Have a good day, and we'll see you next Friday. Thank you.
Thank you.